There is always a moment. It rarely arrives with clarity. It does not declare itself as fear. Instead, it disguises itself as a small shift, subtle, almost unnoticeable. Perhaps it happens when their message does not arrive at the usual time, or when their absence feels heavier than expected, or when a simple thought appears: what if they leave? Until that point, affection felt manageable, enjoyable, optional. But now, something has changed. You begin to notice that their voice calms you, their presence regulates you. Their approval matters more than you intended it to, and that is when the body reacts. Not dramatically, not visibly, but quietly. A tightening in the chest, a subtle restlessness, a flicker of panic that does not match the situation. It is not about them being late. It is not about a delayed response. It is about the realization that your emotional state has started to depend on another person. Dependence feels like exposure. The mind begins to calculate. How much do you care? How much do they care? Are you leaning more than they are? Attachment introduces imbalance, or at least the possibility of it. An imbalance feels unsafe. For someone who fears needing too much, closeness is always monitored. Even in joy, there is observation. Even in comfort, there is caution. You might notice yourself pulling back slightly after a moment of intimacy, saying less than you want to say, delaying a response to appear less eager, pretending not to care as deeply as you do. These adjustments are not manipulative. They are protective, because the moment you realize someone matters deeply, you also realize they have the capacity to wound you. To need someone is to admit that their presence has weight in your life, and weight can shift. Weight can disappear. The fear is not always conscious. It lives beneath language. It is felt more than understood. It might sound like, I should not get too attached. I need to stay independent. I cannot let this become everything. But beneath those thoughts is something more vulnerable. What if I care more than they do? What if I cannot handle losing this? What if I lose myself in this? The fear of needing someone too much often begins with the fear of losing control. When another person becomes emotionally significant, they influence your nervous system. Their tone can soothe you. Their silence can unsettle you. Their affection can elevate you, and that influence feels dangerous, especially for someone who once had no control over loss. So, the body reacts before the mind fully understands. It prepares for impact. It prepares for distance. This is the paradox. The more someone means to you, the more instinctively you may try to reduce their importance. Not because you want less connection, but because you fear what deep connection requires. It requires surrendering the illusion of complete self-sufficiency. It requires admitting that another person can affect you, and that admission feels like standing without armor. In the beginning, this fear may be mistaken for intuition. You may tell yourself you are simply being cautious, realistic, rational, but caution becomes avoidance when it prevents full presence. You may hesitate to express how much you miss them. You may soften your excitement. You may downplay your longing, not because the feelings are small, but because they feel too large. And in that moment of realization, when you sense that someone has become emotionally significant, a quiet negotiation begins inside you. How much of yourself is safe to give? How much need is acceptable? How much longing can be shown without risking rejection? The fear of needing someone too much is rarely about the present person alone. It is about the memory of a time when needing someone did not feel safe, But in this first chapter, it is only a feeling, a subtle tremor, a quiet awareness that your heart is beginning to lean, and leaning, for you, has never felt entirely safe. The fear did not begin in romance. It began much earlier, long before adult relationships, long before conscious awareness. It began in the small formative moments when a child reached outward and the response was uncertain. Every child is born dependent. Need is not a flaw in early life. It is the foundation of survival. A child cries because they cannot regulate alone. They reach because they cannot soothe themselves. They attach because connection equals safety. But what happens when the response is inconsistent? Sometimes the caregiver is warm, sometimes distant, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes emotionally unavailable. The child does not interpret this as complexity. The child interprets it as instability, and instability feels dangerous. If comfort arrives unpredictably, the nervous system becomes alert. If affection is conditional, love feels fragile. If needs are dismissed, need becomes shameful. Perhaps the child learned that expressing distress resulted in irritation. Perhaps they were told they were too sensitive. Perhaps they learned to self-soothe, not because they were secure, but because there was no other choice. Or perhaps the opposite occurred. Perhaps care was present, but inconsistent, sometimes attentive, sometimes distracted, sometimes deeply loving, sometimes emotionally withdrawn. Inconsistency creates hyper-awareness. The child learns to scan, to predict moods, to adjust behavior in order to maintain closeness. Need becomes something that must be managed carefully. Too much need may overwhelm the caregiver. Too little need may create distance. So the child learns balance, not from security, but from fear. This early calibration becomes internalized. The body remembers what the conscious mind forgets. When dependency once felt unstable, adulthood may recreate the same tension. Closeness begins to resemble risk. It is not that the person believes others will leave. It is that their nervous system prepares for the possibility. Some learned that love disappears suddenly, through divorce, through death, through emotional withdrawal, through subtle but repeated disconnection. A child who experienced emotional neglect does not stop needing connection. They stop expressing it. They become self-reliant early, independent beyond their years, calm on the surface. But beneath that composure is a silent adaptation. Needing others is unpredictable. Relying on others is unsafe. And so the belief forms quietly: if I do not need too much, I cannot be hurt too much. This belief does not feel like fear. It feels like maturity, strength, independence. But independence, built from necessity, carries tension, because humans are not designed for isolation. They are wired for attachment. When early needs were unmet or inconsistently met, the nervous system learned to expect disruption, and expectation shapes reaction as an adult. When someone becomes emotionally important, the body reacts as if history might repeat itself. The fear is not always conscious memory. It is procedural memory, a felt sense, a subtle alarm. The heart leans forward. The body pulls back, even if the present partner is kind, even if they are consistent, even if they are safe. The fear is older than them. It belongs to a younger version of the self, one who once waited for reassurance that did not always arrive. This is how the past lives inside present relationships. Not as visible trauma, but as hesitation, not as dramatic distrust, but as careful distance. The child who learned that need could overwhelm others grows into an adult who minimizes their dependence. The child who learned that love could vanish grows into an adult who prepares for absence before it happens. And so when affection deepens, when attachment strengthens, the old blueprint activates. Needing too much feels like stepping onto unstable ground, even if the ground beneath is solid. The fear did not begin in this relationship. It began when vulnerability once felt unanswered, and until that early memory is understood, every deep connection will awaken the same quiet question: is it safe to lean this time? Attachment is not simply an emotion. It is biology. The human nervous system is designed to bond. From infancy, connection shapes the architecture of the brain. When someone offers warmth, responsiveness, and consistency, neural pathways associate closeness with safety. The body relaxes. The heart rate steadies. Stress hormones decrease. But when closeness is unpredictable or fragile, the brain learns something different. It pairs intimacy with vigilance. It associates love with uncertainty. This is not a conscious decision. It is conditioning. Attachment theory describes patterns that emerge from early caregiving experiences. These patterns do not define a person's worth. They describe how the nervous system organizes around closeness. For some, attachment becomes anxious. Closeness feels vital, almost urgent. There is a heightened sensitivity to distance, a deep fear of abandonment. For others, attachment becomes avoidant. Independence feels safer than reliance. Emotional self-sufficiency becomes a shield. Vulnerability feels intrusive, and sometimes both patterns exist within the same person, a longing for closeness intertwined with a fear of it. The fear of needing someone too much often emerges from this intersection. When attachment deepens, the body responds before thought intervenes. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, increases during intimacy. It creates warmth, trust, and emotional closeness. But alongside it, the stress system remains alert if early attachment was unstable. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, scans for signs of rejection. The prefrontal cortex tries to rationalize. The heart moves forward. The body hesitates. This internal contradiction can feel confusing. Why fear something that feels good? Why resist something that brings comfort? Because for a nervous system shaped by inconsistency, closeness carries risk. Neuroscience shows that emotional pain activates similar neural circuits as physical pain. Rejection is not abstract. It is embodied. When attachment bonds strengthen, the possibility of loss becomes neurologically significant. To need someone is to wire the brain around their presence. And the brain does not like uncertainty. If early life taught the nervous system that closeness could disappear, then the system remains cautious. Even in safe relationships, the body may anticipate rupture. This anticipation does not mean the person expects betrayal consciously. It means their regulatory system has learnt to remain guarded. Avoidant tendencies often mask a deep longing. The individual may value intimacy privately, but withdraw when it becomes emotionally intense. They might crave reassurance, yet feel uncomfortable asking for it. They may enjoy connection, but retreat once they sense dependency forming. This is not contradiction. It is protection. The fear of needing someone too much is often the fear of dysregulation. When someone becomes emotionally central, their absence can disrupt internal equilibrium. Mood fluctuates more. Thoughts become preoccupied. Attention narrows toward the relationship. For a nervous system that prizes control, this feels destabilizing. So strategies develop, minimizing attachment, downplaying emotions, creating distance before dependency solidifies. These strategies restore a sense of autonomy. They reduce perceived vulnerability, but they also limit depth. Attachment security is not the absence of need. It is the confidence that need will be met without shame. When early experiences lacked that confidence, adulthood becomes an arena of quiet testing. Does this person respond consistently? Will they stay present? Can they tolerate my vulnerability? The body monitors. The mind analyzes. The heart remains cautious. Understanding attachment reframes the fear. It reveals that the fear of needing someone too much is not weakness. It is an adaptive response to early relational patterns. The nervous system learned to equate dependency with instability. It learned to prioritize emotional self-reliance, because reliance once felt unsafe. Yet, biology continues to push toward connection. Humans are wired to bond. Isolation increases stress hormones. Support lowers them. Social connection predicts longevity, resilience, and emotional regulation. The fear exists because attachment matters. If closeness did not carry meaning, it would not carry risk. And so the conflict persists. The body longs for connection. The mind guards against it. This is the psychology beneath the surface. The fear is not irrational. It is patterned, and patterns, once understood, begin to soften. Inside the fear of needing someone too much, there is tension, not between two people, but within one heart. On one side, there is longing, a quiet desire to rest in someone's presence, to exhale fully, to let the armor loosen. On the other side, there is resistance, a subtle tightening, a voice that says, "Do not get carried away," a reflex that says, "Stay in control." This is the push and pull. The same person who craves closeness may withdraw after intimacy deepens. The same heart that feels safe in connection may later question it. The same mind that wants reassurance may hesitate to ask for it. This internal contradiction can feel confusing, even to the person experiencing it. Why pull away from what feels good? Why create distance when closeness is available? Because closeness awakens memory, not always conscious memory, but emotional memory. When someone becomes important, the stakes rise, and rising stakes awaken old protective strategies. You may notice yourself becoming slightly more reserved after a deeply affectionate moment. You may suddenly feel the urge to reclaim independence. You may convince yourself that you need space, not because space is wrong, but because intensity feels overwhelming. Intensity signals dependence. Dependence signals vulnerability. And vulnerability once carried risk, so the mind begins to restore equilibrium. You respond a little slower. You share a little less. You act a little more self-contained. These shifts are subtle, almost invisible, but they are driven by the need to feel emotionally safe again. Sometimes the push and pull appears as testing, not dramatic testing, but quiet experiments. Will they notice if you withdraw slightly? Will they reach out if you seem distant? Will they reassure without being asked? These tests are rarely manipulative. They are attempts to measure stability, because if someone becomes central to your emotional life, You need to know whether they will stay steady at times. The internal conflict may feel exhausting. Longing pulls you closer. Fear pulls you back. One moment you imagine a shared future. The next moment you imagine how you would cope alone. You may rehearse emotional detachment in advance, as if preparing for an ending that has not occurred. This anticipation of loss is protective. If you prepare early, the impact may hurt less later. But preparation can quietly sabotage presence. Instead of fully experiencing the warmth of connection, part of the mind remains guarded. Instead of relaxing into intimacy, part of the body stays alert. The fear of needing someone too much often manifests as hyper-independence. You tell yourself you do not rely on anyone. You pride yourself on self-sufficiency. You reassure yourself that you could leave at any time. Independence becomes proof of strength. Yet underneath that independence may be a quiet question. If I let myself lean completely, will I lose myself? For some, early life blurred the boundaries between love and enmity. Needing someone once meant sacrificing identity. Attachment once meant absorbing someone else's emotional instability, so adulthood carries a new fear, not only of losing the other person, but of losing oneself inside them. The push and pull, then, is not just about abandonment. It is also about autonomy. Closeness feels beautiful, but it must not consume. The problem is not connection. It is imbalance, and imbalance feels like danger. So the nervous system oscillates forward, backward, closer, distant. To an outside observer, this can seem inconsistent. But internally, it is regulation. It is the attempt to maintain equilibrium between longing and safety. The tragedy of this push and pull is not dramatic conflict. It is subtle restraint. Moments where affection could have deepened, but hesitation intervened. Words that could have been spoken, but were softened. Needs that could have been expressed, but were minimized, all in the name of self-protection. Because to need someone too much feels like standing on unstable ground, and until the nervous system trusts stability, it will continue to oscillate between desire and defense. The heart moves forward, the body checks for danger, and love becomes a quiet negotiation between closeness and control. At first, holding back feels wise. It feels controlled, measured, safe. You tell yourself that you are protecting your peace, that you are maintaining balance, that you are simply being realistic about love, and in many ways, you are. But protection has a cost. When you never allow yourself to fully lean, you never fully experience being held. When you silence your deeper needs, you prevent them from being met. When you ration vulnerability, you limit the depth of connection available to you. Holding back keeps you from falling, but it also keeps you from arriving. You may find yourself in relationships that feel stable, yet distant, affectionate, yet restrained, present, yet incomplete. On the surface, everything appears calm. There is no chaos, no dramatic heartbreak, no overwhelming dependence. But there is also a subtle loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being partially known. When fear governs attachment, emotional expression becomes filtered. You show strength more easily than softness, competence more easily than longing, independence more easily than need. You become someone who is easy to love, but difficult to fully reach. Partners may sense that something remains guarded. That closeness approaches a certain depth and then stops. Not because love is absent, but because safety feels conditional over time. This restraint creates quiet distance, not dramatic separation, but emotional space. You may tell yourself that you are fine, that you do not need more, that this is simply your nature. But deep inside, there may be a muted grief, a grief for the intimacy that could have been, a grief for the comfort you never allowed yourself to fully receive. The cost of holding back is often invisible. It appears as self-sufficiency, as calmness, as maturity, yet beneath that composure is tension. The nervous system remains slightly braced. The heart remains partially guarded. You are never fully at rest in love. Even in stable relationships, there is a small voice preparing for departure. Even in warmth, there is quiet contingency planning. If this ends, I will be okay. If this fades, I will manage, and you will. But surviving is not the same as connecting dots. The irony is that the very strategy designed to prevent pain can create a different kind of pain. Emotional isolation within. Togetherness, you may begin to feel unseen, not because your partner ignores you, but because you never fully reveal yourself. You may feel misunderstood, not because they do not care, but because you never articulate the depth of your need. The fear of needing someone too much can quietly transform into a life of never needing enough, enough to risk, enough to lean, enough to trust that if closeness deepens, you will not dissolve. Over time, the body grows tired of vigilance. Hyper-independence can become exhausting. Self-regulation without co-regulation can feel lonely. Humans are not meant to soothe alone forever. When connection is safe, it lowers stress. It softens defenses. It allows rest. But when you refuse yourself that rest, you carry the weight alone. The cost is subtle but cumulative. Moments of tenderness that feel fleeting instead of grounding. Opportunities for deeper trust that pass quietly. Relationships that remain comfortable but never transformative. You may pride yourself on not being too much, on not overwhelming anyone, on not appearing needy. But need is not excess. Need is human. And when you deny it consistently, a part of you remains unfed. Holding back protects you from collapse, but it also prevents you from surrendering into mutual support. The fear of needing someone too much often protects against heartbreak, yet it can quietly create emotional distance that resembles heartbreak in another form. Not sudden loss, but slow absence, an absence of full presence. An absence of complete vulnerability, an absence of shared dependence that makes intimacy feel alive. And in that absence, something inside you waits not for perfection, not for certainty, but for permission, permission to lean without shame. There comes a quiet shift, not dramatic, not loud, just a subtle realization that the fear has been running longer than necessary. At some point, the body grows tired of guarding. The heart grows tired of rationing. The mind grows tired of preparing for endings that have not happened. And a question begins to surface. What if need is not weakness? For someone who has long equated dependence with danger, this question feels radical, because need once meant vulnerability without guarantee. Need once meant reaching into uncertainty. Need once meant risking disappointment. But as adulthood unfolds, something becomes clearer. Interdependence is not the same as helplessness. Secure attachment does not erase autonomy. It supports it. Psychologically, healthy connection strengthens regulation. When two nervous systems feel safe together, they synchronize. Heart rates align. Stress lowers. cortisol decreases. This is not fragility, it is design. Humans evolved to rely on one another, not to dissolve into one another, but to stabilize through connection. Allowing need without shame begins with redefining strength. Strength is not emotional isolation. It is not the absence of reliance. It is not the refusal to lean. Strength can also mean admitting, quietly, that someone matters. It can mean saying, without apology, that their presence soothes you, that their reassurance comforts you, that their consistency supports you. For someone accustomed to hyper-independence, this feels unfamiliar. There may be discomfort at first, a sense of exposure, a flicker of old fear, but something else begins to appear alongside it. Relief that you no longer have to manage everything alone. Relief that closeness does not require. Relief that you can need without disappearing. Allowing need does not mean surrendering identity. It means trusting that connection can exist without collapse. This trust is not blind. It grows from observation. You notice that the present relationship is consistent. You observe that vulnerability is met with care, not dismissal. You experience reassurance that feels steady rather than conditional gradually. The nervous system resilience. It learns that not all closeness ends in rupture. It learns that reliance does not automatically lead to abandonment. It learns that expressing need does not guarantee rejection. This recalibration is subtle. It happens in small moments, when you admit you missed them and nothing bad happens. When you ask for reassurance and it is given gently. When you lean emotionally and you remain intact. Each of these moments rewrites the blueprint. The old belief, if I need too much, I will be hurt, begins to soften. Not because hurt is impossible, but because vulnerability no longer feels synonymous with danger. Allowing need without shame is not about dependency. It is about integration. You remain independent. You remain capable. You remain whole, but you no longer treat need as an enemy. Instead, you recognize it as a signal that connection matters, that attachment is forming, that intimacy is deepening. And instead of retreating immediately, you pause. You allow the sensation to exist without judgment. The fear may still whisper, but it no longer dictates behavior. You understand that needing someone does not reduce your worth. It expands your capacity for closeness, and in that understanding, something quiet shifts inside you. You no longer measure your value by how little you depend. You begin to measure it by how safely you can connect. In the end, the fear softens, not because love becomes guaranteed, but because the self becomes steadier. The fear of needing someone too much was never truly about them. It was about survival, about the memory of instability, about the old belief that leaning meant losing. But something changes when you realize that connection does not require self. You can love deeply and remain whole. You can lean and still stand. You can need without dissolving. Love without disappearing is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is answering a message quickly because you want to, not because you are afraid. It is saying you missed someone without calculating the emotional cost. It is expressing longing without apologizing for it. It is allowing your nervous system to settle in another person's presence without scanning constantly for signs of departure. This does not mean fear vanishes completely. There may still be moments when attachment feels vulnerable. There may still be flickers of old instinct. But those instincts no longer control the narrative. Instead of pulling away automatically, you pause. Instead of minimizing your need, you acknowledge it. Instead of preparing for loss, you remain present. Presence becomes the new courage. Because to remain open, even knowing love is never guaranteed, requires strength. But this strength is different from hyper-independence. It is not rigid. It is not guarded. It is flexible. It trusts that even if loss occurs, you will survive. Not because you avoided attachment, but because you allowed yourself to experience it fully. Love without disappearing means understanding that identity and intimacy can coexist. You do not have to shrink to be safe. You do not have to distance to stay strong. You do not have to withhold to protect yourself. You can bring your full emotional presence into connection, and if the relationship remains steady, your nervous system learns a new rhythm. Closeness feels grounding instead of destabilizing. Need feels human instead of shameful. Attachment feels warm instead of dangerous. Over time, you begin to notice the difference. You no longer rehearse endings in your mind. You no longer measure affection like a scarce resource. You no longer treat vulnerability as a liability. You allow love to matter. And in allowing it to matter, you discover something profound. Needing someone does not make you small. It makes you alive. Because to need is to acknowledge that connection shapes you. That shared presence regulates you. That intimacy influences you. And influence is not weakness. It is interdependence. The fear once told you that needing too much would cost you everything. But in truth, withholding too much cost you more. It cost you depth. It cost you ease. It cost you the quiet comfort of being supported. When you release the fear gently, gradually, you do not become dependent. You become available. Available for closeness. Available for mutual reliance. Available for the kind of love that does not require constant self-protection. Love without disappearing is not about perfection. It is about balance. You remain yourself, distinct, whole, grounded, and yet you allow someone to matter deeply. You allow your heart to lean, not recklessly, not blindly, but honestly, because the ultimate realization is this: to need someone is not to surrender power. It is to trust that connection can exist without collapse. And in that trust, the fear grows quieter. Not because you need less, but because you are no longer ashamed that you do.